We're back.
Welcome back to RVN TV Morning Coffee. We are back. My name is Cinni.
I'm still Joe Asumendi.
And we have a terrific guest. His name is Bruce H. Levitt. He's a managing partner at Levitt and Slofkus. I want to make sure I pronounce that correctly. He's zooming in from far off Maplewood, New Jersey.
Okay.
He's actually a neighbor, but it's good to have you here via Zoom, Bruce. And you're a financial expert. In the email that we got talking about your appearance, it mentioned 5 steps that companies can take to deal with COVID. Maybe you could review those for us.
Sure. Very generally, and this deals generally with businesses that have opened or that are looking to reopen from the COVID-19 pandemic, especially now because there are a lot of businesses that have been open and they're running out of their PPP funds. So they're finding that although they may have had a source of capital for a number of months, that's being dried up. I read a recent statistic that 84% of small businesses that receive PPP funds will run out by the end of next week. So basically the steps that I've advised my clients to take, whether they're open or considering open, first is they've got to figure out what their debt is. And it becomes an analysis of secured debt, unsecured debt, debt owed to landlords, debt owed to creditors. You've got to know what your debt is. Next step is you've got to be strategic with payments. If you've got limited resources, you're going to pay those creditors that can do the most damage to you. For instance, your landlord. Landlord, if he puts you out of your space, you're not going to have a business to run. Then you have to negotiate with your creditors. Keep them in the loop. Landlords, banks, creditors, everybody's going through the same situation now, and communication is absolutely key. Then you've got to negotiate. If you have funds, you try to negotiate with the creditors and see if you can come up with a solution. And last but not least is you've got to consider bankruptcy options. Just before this pandemic began, a new small business provision, the United States Bankruptcy Code of Chapter 11 of the United States Bankruptcy Code became effective. And it's an ideal mechanism to help small businesses reorganize now through the pandemic.
Wow. So, I think, first of all, before we go too much further in the conversation, don't go it alone, I think, is great advice. Just imagining that you think you know what to do and actually knowing what to do are two completely different things. So right off the bat, before we talk anymore, how does somebody reach you to get help from you with these issues?
We're essentially bankruptcy attorneys. We represent individuals and small businesses in bankruptcies. But I call myself a bankruptcy attorney. We try to avoid bankruptcy by negotiating with creditors. We're located in Maplewood, New Jersey. The name of the firm is Levitt and Slofkus. Our telephone number is 973-313-1200. You can find us on the web at www.lsbankruptcylaw.com. And as you were just mentioning, you can't go it alone. You need the help of a disinterested third party. I don't come into it with the emotion that the business owner has.
Bruce, I have a question for you. How cooperative are credit card companies and creditors during this pandemic to work with a business or an individual to make sure that that they can get through this?
I'm finding that creditors, by and large, including credit card companies, are being respectful. They're being helpful. Many credit card companies have offered forbearance. Mortgage lenders have been offering forbearance. Landlords, to a certain extent, have been offering forbearance. The key is to communicate with those creditors. When you reach out to the creditor and say, this is my situation, I'm in trouble, I want to pay you, and at some point I will pay you, that's much different from waiting for the landlord or the creditor to call and track you down.
Yeah, but how does that affect your credit score? That's my question.
If you have a formal forbearance agreement, they are not reporting negatively to the credit bureau. So for instance, many of my individual clients, I've had them reach out to their credit card companies, request the COVID-19 forbearance. If they're in those forbearance programs, there's no late fees, there's no payments due, and there's no negative credit reporting. Of course, at the end of the forbearance, an agreement has to be reached to repay.
Right.
But they're working out deals. They're allowing, especially with regard to mortgages, there's federal programs that deal with mortgage arrears. Again, landlords I've been able to negotiate with, and they generally don't report to the credit bureaus. Credit card companies do. But that's the difference between reaching out, being proactive, requesting whatever relief is available, and sitting and doing nothing, because by then the creditor reaches out, they've already reported it negatively to the credit bureaus.
Well, that's a key takeaway. Don't just stop paying your bills. Call the people you owe the money to and ask for forbearance on those debts or obligations, and you don't want to be foreclosed on and you want to negotiate. Is that right, Bruce?
Absolutely. And again, they will negotiate. Everybody's going through this together. It's not as if this is something that's going to come as a surprise when the creditor gets the phone call. But experiencing the same situation.
Well, and that's another question. We thought this was going to be 2 months. I mean, we were talking earlier today about how we're now 5 months into this crisis. And there is no end in sight, you were saying. So how long can this go on?
That's a question for far brighter minds than me, but I don't know. Again, I've been getting phone calls from my clients since day one, and we've been trying to be optimistic, and we're trying to suggest that this can't last forever. Let's hold on. Well, you're right. We're 5 months into it. PPP money is drying up. The extra money from the government on unemployment is drying up. I don't know how much, unless unless Washington does its job. I don't know how much longer people are going to hold out, because the debt is there, but the income isn't, and at some point the creditors won't be able to sit back because they're businesses also. So we're in a really, really difficult time here.
In your experience, Bruce, how many businesses are never going to come back? I mean, it seems to me that a lot of these smaller businesses can't hold on very much longer.
You're right, and it's the hardest thing that I have to do when I'm analyzing a situation for a small business, to tell that business, I don't think you're going to be able to make it. And there's more and more of these businesses, and certainly in the restaurant and entertainment business, but even small retail. Even though their doors are open and they're complying with all the requirements of social distancing, people just aren't coming into the stores.
Right.
It's a huge problem.
Wow.
Yeah, Al and I were talking about it before the show. Is that there's several businesses that just can't compete with smaller businesses. Like what we're talking about, a restaurant that, let's say a high-priced restaurant. We'd like to go for the atmosphere and stuff, but their takeout food is far more expensive than, let's say, Joe's Pizza Parlor or something. So that isn't even a solution for them.
A lot of them, the costs of even keeping the doors open to do takeout, it doesn't work, because especially restaurants, they're working on such slim margins that they can't make the money they need, even if they have limited staff. The overhead on these businesses, again, the higher end businesses, their rent is excessive. They generally have business loans.
Right.
They just can't make it.
No. And that's got to be hard advice to give a business owner. If you know eventually under these circumstances that you're going to have to close your doors, maybe it's better to do that now than to wait until you're in a much tougher position.
Absolutely. And again, I can give that dispassionate third-party advice, but especially with regard to small business owners, you're dealing with their life, you're dealing with their livelihood. And it's a very, very difficult decision to make. Unfortunately, I'm seeing many more, certainly in the last month, many more businesses make that decision. Early on, everybody was hopeful, they were going to hold on, this was going to pass in a couple of months. I've been seeing in the last month that more and more businesses are making that decision. And again, once the PPP funds run out and people don't have that extra money to spend in the restaurants and the retail stores, we're going to see a lot more.
You know, that's it's a harsh reality, but if you're in a situation where you're facing these really, really tough choices, you don't have to face them alone. One more time, Bruce, how do people call you?
It's Levitt and Slavkus, Maplewood, New Jersey, 973-313-1200.
Bruce Levitt of Levitt and Slavkus, thanks so much for joining us this morning on Morning Coffee. Great information. Tough times, but now is exactly the time to get help like Bruce. And appreciate you being on, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you. Good to be on.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks.
Back after these messages.
Mm-hmm.